Tonight, a CNN exclusive. New questions about the missing Secret Service texts from around January 6. According to multiple sources, the embattled Homeland Security Inspector General first learned of those missing messages back in May of 2021. That's more than a year before he then alerted the January 6 committee. Now, those texts sent before and during the Capitol riot may have contained potentially valuable evidence, since the Secret Service was with Trump on January 6. And the former president fought with agents when they refused to let him go to the Capitol, according to witnesses testifying under oath. And tonight, it's not just the Secret Service that has a problem with missing messages. CNN also learning that texts from Trump's acting Homeland Security chief, Chad Wolf, and his top deputy, Ken Cuccinelli, are also missing. Those messages sent in the days leading up to January 6. Cuccinelli is key because he had been ordered by Trump to seize voting machines in the wake of the election. This according to former acting Deputy Attorney General Richard Donahue, who also testified under oath. Here's what he said.
Mr. Cuccinelli was on the phone. He was the number 2 at DHS at the time. I was on the speakerphone, and the president essentially said, "Ken, I'm sitting here with the acting Attorney General. He just told me it's your job to seize machines, and you're not doing your job."
Whitney Wild, Out Front Live in Washington. Whitney, you helped break this story tonight. You've been covering these missing messages for some time here. What are you learning about how this happened and how unusual this is for messages such as this not only to go missing, but to not be reported for such a length of time?
Well, that's the big question that these congressional oversight committees are trying to get to. And what they know now is that it appears at least, or what they had said prior rather, is that the Inspector General was aware of the missing text messages as of December 2021. That was the information we had learned some days ago when 2 key Democrats were calling for the Inspector General's recusal. Now, sources tell CNN that the Secret Service notified the Office of the Inspector General that text messages were erased in May of 2021, 7 months earlier than previously known. The Secret Service has explained that these text messages were lost previously in a previously scheduled data migration of agents' cell phones. The committee and Kufari are interested in these text messages because, if you point out, these were people who were right at the center of what was going on January 6th, and they, depending on what the content is, could shed light on the Secret Service's response that day, and further what they witnessed, among others. Our sources told us that one of the key problems here is that key personnel inside the Secret Service didn't realize these text messages were actually going to disappear when they did this data migration. They believed that they were backed up somewhere, and they didn't realize that this was totally absolute, that they were totally gone. And when they realized that, albeit too late, they did try to go back to the cell phone provider to get them back, but they couldn't bring back the content of that. Jim, the other big thing that we're learning here about the timeline, so now, again, we've established that the Inspector General's office was notified in May that these text messages were erased. However, in July, a representative for the Inspector General's office told the Department of Homeland Security they were no longer seeking these text messages. That was in July of 2021, more than about a year before the Inspector General brought these hurdles to congressional oversight committees, Jim.
DHS oversees Secret Service. Of course, DHS also an agency in charge of policing cyber crime. I mean, just remarkable lack of oversight. Whitney Wild, great reporting. Thanks so much. Out front now, Olivia Troy, former Homeland Security and Counterterrorism Advisor to Vice President Pence. She worked at DHS. Phil Mudd, former CIA counterterrorism official. Norm Eisen, he served as counsel to House Democrats during Trump's first impeachment trial. Also served as the Obama White House ethics czar. Olivia, first to you. You worked at DHS. One, how would these messages go missing? I mean, how would someone not take steps to preserve them, but also wait a year, the Inspector General wait a year to report that to the committee?
Yeah, it's a little surprising, especially, look, I have worked technical migrations in the government, and I find it a little bit confusing that people were not aware that these messages were going to disappear, especially the amount of planning that goes into these migrations. I can tell you that firsthand, having done it. But also, look, I came from DHS. When you work at senior levels in the Trump administration, you know exactly where people's loyalties lie. I know Cuccinelli and Chad Wolf and all these people and Kufari very well. There's a reason that I went very public with my concerns about the Trump administration rather than going through the traditional whistleblower process, which would have led me through the Inspector General's office at DHS. And I'll just say that. So there's a level of trust there that you understand. The other part of it is, I'm going to tell you, being a Trump admin person, most of the administration communicated on encrypted Signal apps, or like apps like Signal. And so a lot of the time, these messages were likely disappearing. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a little bit suspect. You can either turn in your government phone. Was there an encrypted app on it? Was it on your personal phone? In any case, it seems these messages are gone either way.
Phil Mudd, you worked in government, CIA, also FBI. I mean, these are the agencies charged with, as I mentioned earlier, fighting cybercrime. I mean, this also for the Secret Service, arguably the most stressful day for the service since the Reagan assassination. I mean, there was a arguably genuine threat to the president, to the Capitol. Is this incompetence that you see here, or is there something more? Do you suspect there was something more, something deliberate?
Boy, Jim, as usual, you're more polite than I would be. I guess that's why you have your job and I have mine. This is beyond incompetence. One of the problems you have is that any inspector general, whether it's at the CIA, the FBI, or Department of Homeland Security, doesn't work for the head of, say, Homeland Security. They work, in essence, for the Congress. How can the inspector general go to the Congress now and say, you can trust me to conduct ongoing investigations when there are these gaps of reporting to you? I think the inspector general has to go. The second thing I'd say, and let me be equally blunt, what the heck was the chief information officer at DHS doing? If you're migrating data, the first question you have for someone who grew up with a manual typewriter is that data backed up? Not only because you're supposed to do that, but because the law says you have to do that. Those two people, the inspector general and the chief information officer at DHS, it's not just incompetence. This means their careers have to end at this organization. There's no explanation I can come up with, Jim.
Norm Eisen, you know the law. As Phil notes, there are laws about preserving records. That was your job as ethics czar. In fact, part of your job during the Obama administration. So beyond losing a job, I mean, are there legal implications here?
Jim, there are, depending on the level of intentionality. And to Phil's point, how many coincidences are we going to have involving DHS and the Secret Service and these missing messages on the most crucial period of time that our nation has confronted in decades? I mean, it just strains belief. That points you towards taking a hard look. We don't want to prejudge, but DOJ is undoubtedly taking a hard look at some of the federal penalties that can include criminal penalties if we find that this was not an accident, that it was not negligence, that it was not coincidence after coincidence, but something intentional was going on here.
Olivia, this comes as we're also learning missing texts from Trump's Homeland Security officials, Chad Wolf and Ken Cuccinelli, also part of this pattern, right, that we're discussing. I do want to play some testimony from the January 6th committee from Richard Donahue about what Trump was asking of Cuccinelli after the election, which then speaks to why his communications would be of importance to the committee. Have a listen.
My cell phone rang. It was the president, and he had information about a truck supposedly full of shredded ballots in Georgia that was in the custody of an ICE agent whose name he had. I told him that ICE was part of Department of Homeland Security. It was really up to DHS to make a call if their agent was involved. And he said, fine, I understand. Can you just make sure that Ken, meaning Ken Cuccinelli, knows about this? I said, fine, I would pass that along to him. I eventually contacted Ken Cuccinelli later that evening.
You were in the White House. How crucial, Olivia, was Cuccinelli himself to Trump's efforts, his attempted efforts to overturn the election?
Well, look, Cuccinelli was definitely in the inner circle when it came to Trump circles. I saw him in the West Wing very often. And, the fact that he had this conversation speaks to the extent that he was communicating about these potential illegal actions and some of these crazy sort of conspiracy ideas that were being pushed out of this inner circle. And I'll say this, I would hope that we would be able to see some of these communications and really figure out what went on. And I think all of this, I just want to point out, speaks to the importance of the January 6th Select Committee's work in this investigation, because all of these things we would not know about or realize the extent of this entire effort that went on to stop the peaceful transfer of power without this investigation, right? And without these hearings, without these testimonies, without these firsthand witness accounts.